Two names synonymous with Hollywood royalty, two legends fiercely guarding their thrones. But behind the glamorous rivalry of Bette Davis and Joan Crawford lay a decades-long hatred so intense it fueled their greatest performances. This intense rivalry is just one of the 18 feuds the studios covered up to save their stars. Only one of these hidden conflicts ended in a tragedy so profound, the truth remains obscured by the highest levels of studio power. The feud's genesis was less about professional competition and more about the eternal rivalry over a man, Franchot Tone. In the early 1930s, both Davis and Crawford found themselves starring at Warner Brothers. Davis fell deeply for her dangerous co-star, Tone. But before Davis could secure his affections, the glamorous Crawford swept in and promptly married him. This act was a devastating personal betrayal Davis never forgot. She had called Tone the great love of her life, and watching her rival walk down the aisle with him was a snub that drew the battle lines. Davis, who considered herself the superior artist, frequently called Crawford common and belittled her acting ability. Crawford, a master of studio politics, subtly undermined Davis's projects or took roles Davis desired. Their individual achievements, Crawford's Oscar and Davis's triumph, only exacerbated the tension, turning professional success into scorekeeping. By the 1960s, both stars found their dazzling lights dimmed. They were no longer leading ladies, forcing them into a career convergence neither desired. The studio system, seeing an irresistible opportunity, engineered their pairing in the thriller. Whatever happened to Baby Jane? The premise alone, two aging, resentful sisters trapped together, perfectly mirrored their real-life relationship. On the set, the animosity erupted into open warfare. The physical sabotage began immediately. Crawford reportedly requested a Coca-Cola machine, knowing Davis was the spokesperson for rival Pepsi. During a scene where Jane, Davis, was meant to strike Blanche, Crawford, Davis allegedly delivered the blow with such force Crawford required stitches. Not to be outdone, when Blanche was meant to be dragging Jane, Crawford deliberately wore a heavy lead weight belt, forcing Davis to strain herself physically. The director, Robert Aldrich, found himself refereeing dangerous antics, with the studio covering up reports of distress. Even after the film's success, the feud did not end. When Davis received an Academy Award nomination, Crawford actively campaigned against her, calling up rival nominees and offering to accept the award if they won. When Anne Bancroft won but couldn't attend, Crawford proudly and literally walked onto the stage to accept the Oscar, savoring the opportunity to humiliate Davis. It was the ultimate one-upmanship. Their animosity was the stuff of legend, a bitter example of how personal scores defined a legacy. It was a rivalry fueled by ambition and the hurt of a betrayal that never truly healed. But the ultimate act of revenge was yet to come. The Oscar snub was only the beginning. Next, two gentlemen who hid their hatred beneath a handshake till one fateful Oscar night saw a shocking public mistake that fueled their feud for life. In a town built on illusion, some feuds were quiet, simmering beneath gentlemanly smiles. Gary Cooper and Frederick March, two titans of the silver screen, maintained a polite public facade while an unspoken rivalry drove them. The tension stemmed from their competing claims to the title of Hollywood's most distinguished actor. Cooper, the reserved figure, represented the naturalistic American hero. March, conversely, was a product of the formal stage. While Cooper could be a cowboy, March had to play one, a distinction everything in the 1930s. Their rivalry peaked in 1937. That year, both men delivered career-defining performances. March in A Star is Born, and Cooper in Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. The ultimate prize, the Academy Award, came down to a showdown. March won, yet the Academy initially announced Cooper as the recipient, an embarrassing mix-up that intensified their competition. It felt like a public mistake, cementing the idea that they were two sides of the same cinematic coin. Cooper, wary of March's theatrical background, avoided roles requiring overt acting, preferring subtle restraint. March, in response, took on complex roles, striving for an artistry he felt Cooper neglected. When forced into the same social circles, interactions were conspicuously cold. They maintained gentlemanly appearances, exchanging brief greetings, while unspoken score settling hung heavy. The studios understood this was a battle for prestige. They ensured the two were rarely cast together, covering up the tension by never allowing it to boil over. This strategic separation helped both men maintain their identities. Cooper, who felt March often looked down upon him, doubled down on proving his authenticity. March, who saw Cooper's natural style as lazy, constantly sought challenges that validated his technique. This unspoken contest drove them both, but it cost them any possibility of a genuine friendship. Their rivalry wasn't a screaming match. It was quiet, determined competition between two men striving to be the best. It was the feuding of egos, a conflict of cinematic philosophies, and an example of how mistaken identity crystallized a lifelong professional animosity. The next story exposed the cruel hierarchy of the Golden Age, as one star's ambition led to a devastating cultural theft. The fight for this groundbreaking role was already bitter, but the studio's final decision was the greatest betrayal of a pioneering actress's career. Marlene Dietrich commanded the screen with an icy allure, but her cool exterior hid a fiercer ambition. When a groundbreaking role called for an actress of Asian descent, Dietrich's sudden interest ignited a quiet but significant feud with the brilliant Anna May Wong. In 1932, Shanghai Express promised gripping drama. For the pivotal role of Hui Fei, a character of Chinese heritage, the obvious choice was Anna May Wong. Wong was Hollywood's first Chinese-American movie star, possessing the authenticity and skill to bring Hui Fei to life. Many expected the role to be hers, a significant step for representation. However, the powerful machinery of Hollywood had other plans. Marlene Dietrich, riding a wave of success, saw the role as a challenge to her versatility. Despite her entirely European heritage, Dietrich aggressively pursued the role, leveraging her star power. The studio Paramount Pictures faced a dilemma. Casting Wong would have been a triumph for authenticity. Casting Dietrich was a guaranteed box office draw. The commercial imperative overshadowed artistic integrity. Dietrich was cast as Hui Fei. The decision was a profound disappointment for Anna May Wong and a stark reminder of unfair practices. Wong was told her authentic background was less valuable than a white star's exoticized portrayal. The studio employed yellowface, using makeup to alter Dietrich's appearance, a practice now understood as demeaning. Wong, though graceful in public, privately harbored immense frustration and a sense of betrayal. She had spent her career battling stereotypes. To see a Chinese character role go to a European actress, complete with mocking depictions, was a stinging rebuke. The feud, unspoken, was deeply personal, highlighting the systemic struggles faced by minority actors. The studio presented the casting as a triumph of star power, downplaying any suggestion of a missed opportunity. They ensured the public focused on Dietrich's glamour, rather than the disappointment of a pioneering actress. Shanghai Express became a classic, but its casting remains a controversial footnote, illustrating Hollywood's priorities. It was a silent struggle for visibility and respect that Anna May Wong fought against a system not ready for her to truly shine. This was a silent struggle against the system. But the next feud was loud, bitter, and tragically fought between two sisters who shared a name and a mother, but whose competition for an Oscar was so intense, one sister permanently refused to speak to the other. They were sisters, actresses, and rivals, whose personal animosity spilled onto the silver screen and became one of Hollywood's most heartbreaking feuds. Olivia de Havilland and Joan Fontaine's relationship was a perpetual battle for recognition and a shining legacy. The animosity began long before Hollywood, marked by intense competition for their mother's attention. Olivia rose to fame first. Joan, struggling in her sister's shadow, adopted her stepfather's surname, Fontaine, to carve out her own identity. Their parallel careers fueled their rivalry. The tension became an industry secret. The 1941 Academy Awards ceremony crystallized their divide. Both sisters were nominated for Best Actress. When Joan Fontaine was announced as the winner, the resulting scene was an iconic public snub. As Fontaine rose to accept, she deliberately ignored her sister. De Havilland offered no applause. The moment spoke volumes about the depth of the resentment. 2 years later, the tables turned. Olivia de Havilland won her own Oscar. As she walked past her sister, Fontaine offered a conciliatory gesture. Olivia's reaction was swift and cold. She turned away, refusing the truce. She later remarked, "I felt that, if I had spoken, it would have been a 5-minute acceptance speech." This public rejection served as Olivia's potent, delayed response to the earlier humiliation. The conflict wasn't confined to awards ceremonies. They avoided the same social functions, maintaining a cool, deliberate distance. The press delighted in the sensational details of their feud. For decades, the sisters did not speak, maintaining an astonishing estrangement. It was an epic family drama, showcasing the intense personal cost of competing for the ultimate prize. The rivalry remains a painful example of how the struggle for recognition could break even the strongest family ties. Don't miss our next deep dive into Hollywood's hidden histories. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Next, we look at a comedic duo whose on-screen chemistry was flawless, but whose off-screen relationship was fraught with quiet tension rooted in money and control. They were cinema's most beloved pair, but one partner felt deeply betrayed by the other's creative dominance and the sheer injustice of their paychecks. They were cinema's most beloved comedic duo. Yet even Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy, the kings of laughter, harbored tensions, a quiet feud rooted in creative control and financial inequality. The enduring image of Laurel and Hardy is effortless camaraderie, but their partnership was complex. Stan Laurel was the true creative force. He was the meticulous craftsman, spending hours rewriting scenes and designing sight gags. He was the director, writer, and editor of their universe. Oliver Hardy possessed natural comedic genius, yet was far more laid back. Hardy saw acting as a job. He would perform flawlessly and leave, content to let Laurel handle post-production. This differing approach established the fault line. Laurel felt the pressure of carrying the immense creative weight, while Hardy's ease was sometimes seen as lack of commitment. The professional tension escalated due to financial disparities. Their contracts were negotiated separately and contained different terms. Laurel, despite being the mastermind, frequently found himself in a less advantageous position, which bred deep resentment. To the public, they were inseparable, but in the ledgers, they were often treated differently. When their contracts ended, the friction became more pronounced. Laurel battled studio executives fiercely over control. Hardy, who prioritized stability, found Laurel's nature tiresome. There were periods when the duo arrived on set, exchanged only courtesies, and spent the day in uncomfortable silence. Their ability to snap into their iconic personas while harboring distance is a testament to their brilliance. Laurel saw his battles as necessary for their art's survival. Hardy simply wanted a balanced life and a fair wage. Their feud was not screaming fits, but the soul-crushing exhaustion of two different men tethered to the same enterprise. Despite the friction, profound respect did exist. They were bound by decades of shared history. However, the contrast between the joy they brought to millions and the strained silence permeated their working life. Now we turn to a clash of titanic egos and creative wills, the legendary battle between the incandescent star, Marilyn Monroe, and the brilliant, unforgiving director, Billy Wilder. The set of their greatest film became a battleground, and the shocking details of her famous anxiety and his furious impatience nearly destroyed one of the greatest comedies in history. Marilyn Monroe, the incandescent star, often clashed with her directors, but few rivalries were as legendary as her tumultuous relationship with the demanding Billy Wilder. On the set of Some Like It Hot, their battle of wills nearly brought production to a halt. By the late 1950s, Monroe's star power was unmatched, but her professional reputation was difficult. Prone to deep insecurities, She was frequently late and struggled under pressure. She relied on her coach, Paula Strasberg, a presence Wilder viewed as a disruptive intrusion. Wilder, the genius, was notorious for his quick temper. He was a creature of meticulous efficiency. Monroe's chaotic style was, to him, a profound insult. The tension between the star, who needed emotional reassurance, and the director, who demanded technical excellence, created strife on the set. The production became legendary for its difficulties, with Monroe's unpredictable behavior causing costly delays. One famous incident involved the line, "Where's the bourbon?" Monroe, in her anxiety, simply could not deliver it correctly, allegedly requiring over 60 takes. Wilder resorted to writing the line on a blackboard. The pressure mounted, creating a situation frustrating for the entire cast, including Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon. Wilder's exasperation often boiled over. He famously remarked that directing Monroe was like managing the German army. Yet, even in his frustration, Wilder acknowledged her talent. He confessed that despite the agonizing difficulty, the result was always magical. The vulnerability that made her difficult was the same quality that made her luminous on screen. The studios were desperate to conceal the hostility and spiraling production costs. They feared news of the director-star clash would overshadow the film. They ran counter-narratives of the artistic temperament, clashing, obscuring the drain Monroe's instability placed on the crew. If these untold stories of Hollywood's past fascinate you, please share this video with fellow classic film lovers. The irony is that Some Like It Hot emerged from this creative turmoil as one of the greatest comedies. It was a testament to Billy Wilder's resilience and Marilyn Monroe's genius. Their feud was a testament to the idea that genius often comes packaged with profound difficulty. Next, we explore a more reserved, generational clash between two Hollywood giants, the established king, Clark Gable, and the rebellious newcomer, Robert Mitchum. Their battle for screen presence was a quiet, cold war fought with smoldering glances and silent disdain, all while sharing a famously volatile set. One was Hollywood's king, the other a rebellious newcomer. When Clark Gable and Robert Mitchum shared the screen, two opposing forces collided, creating a tension the studios concealed. Gable, the idol, represented the polished, traditional hero. Mitchum arrived as the post-war anti-hero, possessing a laconic persona and a natural disdain for the artifice Gable perfected. The friction was a symbolic clash between the passing guard and the new era of cinema. The two were brought together for the 1961 production of The Misfits, already famous for its troubled set. Beneath the chaos, Gable and Mitchum engaged in a quieter, yet significant, battle for screen presence. Gable commanded the set with the assurance of a reigning monarch. His method was precise. Mitchum, in contrast, possessed deep charisma without effort. He viewed Gable's formality with cynicism, making cutting remarks about Hollywood royalty. This lack of effort was a subtle insult to Gable. The tension manifested in a freezing reserve. They were polite, but distant. Gable could not fathom Mitchum's casual approach, and Mitchum found Gable's adherence to the outdated studio system tiresome. The feud was fought with smoldering glances. Gable used his seniority to establish dominance, while Mitchum used his unbothered presence to undercut the king's authority. The studio, conscious of Gable's declining health, was keen to keep the generational friction out of the press. They needed the narrative to be about artistic vision, not subtle animosity. They minimized any chance of public confrontation, an attempt to keep the classic Golden Age hero intact. Ultimately, the film served as an accidental, cinematic passing of the torch. Gable's passing shortly after filming, Wrapped marked the end of an era. Mitchum continued to thrive. Their feud encapsulated Hollywood's tumultuous shift from polished elegance to rugged realism. Next, we explore a deeply personal and heartbreaking conflict, the friendship of John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara, which was tested by political beliefs and public snubs. The battle of their two strong wills proved that sometimes even the deepest affection is no match for the chasm of deeply held public beliefs. On screen, they were the fiery, passionate duo. Off-screen, John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara shared a friendship as robust as their on-screen romance. But even the closest bonds can fray under Hollywood's pressures. Wayne, the embodiment of American masculinity, and O'Hara, the red-haired Irish beauty, made 5 unforgettable films. Their partnership was legendary, built on mutual respect. As the 1960s progressed, the political landscape became divided. John Wayne became an increasingly vocal conservative, using his platform to champion his ideals. He gave blunt and controversial interviews. O'Hara, generally more reserved, held a different perspective, and the chasm between their public stances strained their private camaraderie. The peak of their clash came after an interview Wayne gave in 1971, in which he made sweeping statements about social issues that caused public outcry. The comments stood in sharp contrast to O'Hara's character. For O'Hara, his remarks were a profound disappointment. She felt his words were insensitive and did not reflect the compassionate man she believed him to be. The tension was a quiet, heartbreaking estrangement. O'Hara, known for her passionate nature, could not overlook the statements. The rift was so deep that she withdrew, choosing to express her disapproval through distance. She refused to validate his opinions. The studios were aware of the potential damage such a high-profile disagreement could cause. They worked diligently to ensure the press attributed any distance to busy schedules, rather than the painful political divide. While the friendship eventually weathered the storm, the incident served as a potent reminder that even the strongest bonds can be tested by cultural waters. Their feud was a somber reflection of a nation grappling with change, proving that in Hollywood, the quietest disagreements are the most deeply felt. Now we uncover a more subtle conflict between a director and his young star. Their silent feud played out across years of their relationship, a constant draining battle for control that ended with the star winning her artistic independence from one of cinema's greatest manipulators. And she was his young muse, his secret wife. But Charlie Chaplin's controlling nature and Paulette Goddard's fiercely independent spirit led to a quiet but significant feud that played out amidst the making of The Great Dictator and beyond. Chaplin, the cinematic genius, maintained a fiercely guarded private life. When he cast the spirited Paulette Goddard in modern times, the chemistry was immediate. They soon entered a clandestine marriage. Goddard found herself in the shadow of a living legend, a role that brought opportunity, but also suffocating demands, particularly as they embarked on The Great Dictator. The Great Dictator was Chaplin's first talkie. Chaplin, a notorious perfectionist, was legendary for his demanding nature, requiring retakes until every gesture was precise. For Goddard, this constant need for control became a source of frustration. Goddard was not a demure starlet. She possessed a strong will and ambition. As her star rose, her desire for independence grew, creating a constant clash with Chaplin's need to maintain dominance. The set became a quiet battleground. Chaplin saw his direction as artistic necessity. Goddard viewed the retakes as a stifling attempt to control her spirit. The studio went to great lengths to manage the appearance of their marriage. They were keen to hide the growing personal strain, fearing the drama would overshadow the film's crucial message. Goddard's eventual break from Chaplin was a testament to her independence. By the time The Great Dictator premiered, their personal relationship had dissolved, though they remained publicly silent about their separation. This strategic silence was a final, agreed-upon cover-up. Ultimately, Goddard succeeded in her ambition. The feud was a quiet severing of ties, illustrating the profound challenges of being an independent woman, partnered with one of cinematic history's most controlling figures. Next, we move from a quiet domestic conflict to an explosive clash of cinematic personalities. The rivalry between the dazzling beauty of Elizabeth Taylor and the raw, unbridled intensity of Shelley Winters. The difference in their acting style was immediate, palpable, and threatened to destroy the emotional heart of their masterpiece film. Elizabeth Taylor reigned as Hollywood's most glittering gem. But when she shared the screen with the fiery, unfiltered Shelley Winters, two vastly different acting styles collided, resulting in an on-set feud. The year was 1951, and the film was George Stevens's A Place in the Sun. Taylor personified elegance. Winters, an actress of the method school, was known for her grit. Where Taylor was the princess of Hollywood, Winters was the passionate, working-class champion. The tension on the set was immediate. Taylor's character, the wealthy Angela Vickers, was Taylor's public image. Winters played Alice Tripp, the poor factory worker. The difference in their approaches fueled their personal animosity. Winters took issue with Taylor's perceived reliance on natural beauty, feeling Taylor did not approach the demanding material with rigorous preparation. Winters felt Taylor was not taking the acting seriously enough. Taylor, in turn, found Winters's method techniques disruptive. She preferred the efficiency of the old studio system. This clash created friction. One account details a moment where Winters, frustrated, spoke sharply to the young star, demanding commitment. Taylor, unaccustomed to such challenges, retreated with disdain. The director recognized that this natural tension actually benefited the film. To maintain Taylor's image, the studio downplayed the backstage feuding. They focused the press narrative on the film's artistic merits, ensuring the public remained unaware of the subtle war of wills. Their rivalry was a fascinating study in contrasts. It demonstrated that in Hollywood, the clash between differing philosophies of acting could be just as potent as any confrontation. If these untold stories of Hollywood's past fascinate you, please share this video with fellow classic film lovers. Now we journey back to the silent era to uncover a mentorship that ended in quiet disappointment and professional distance between the stone-faced genius Buster Keaton and his former mentor, Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle. The tragedy that befell one of them forced the other to make a cold, professional choice that scarred their relationship forever. Before his own iconic status, Buster Keaton learned the ropes from Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle. But a mentorship turned sour, and a quiet animosity simmered between the two comedic giants, shadowed by Arbuckle's tragic downfall. Arbuckle was the king of silent comedy when Keaton arrived. Arbuckle was a crucial mentor, teaching Keaton the mechanics of filmmaking. This apprenticeship was invaluable. However, as Keaton's talent flourished, a professional divide emerged. Keaton was an engineering genius who saw film as a medium for elaborate stunts. Arbuckle was content with slapstick. Keaton's desire for full creative control created friction. The professional tension was tragically overshadowed by an event that destroyed Arbuckle's career. In 1921, Arbuckle was involved in a scandal that led to 3 highly publicized trials. Though acquitted, the media coverage and studio system's public shunning were devastating. He was labeled a pariah. This catastrophic end created a profound dilemma for Keaton. He owed his start to Arbuckle. Yet Hollywood's public relations machine demanded absolute distance. Keaton, compelled to protect his future, could not publicly champion his friend. This necessity for distance formed the basis of their final feud, an estrangement born of professional survival. Arbuckle could only watch as Keaton ascended. The bitterness for Arbuckle was immense. The feud was a heartbreaking clash between personal loyalty and professional necessity. Keaton found success through the very system that had persecuted his mentor. It remains a poignant footnote. Next, we explore an explosive clash between 2 cinematic titans. The volatile, groundbreaking method actor, Marlon Brando, and the old school, demanding crooner Frank Sinatra. The battle between the Mumbles and the chairman of the board was so petty and aggressive, it almost shut down the production of a legendary musical. One, the brooding king of method acting. The other, the smooth monarch of music. When Marlon Brando and Frank Sinatra were forced together on a film set, their fundamental differences ignited an explosive feud. The collision occurred during the 1955 production of Guys and Dolls. Sinatra represented the old guard, believing in efficiency. Brando, the newcomer, embodied the method, requiring endless retakes for emotional truth. Their contrasting philosophies created a thick tension. Sinatra was hostile toward Brando. He viewed the method as pretentious. Brando saw Sinatra's approach as superficial. The animosity quickly escalated to childish behavior. Sinatra attempted to intimidate Brando, reportedly calling him mumbles. In one infamous instance, during a lunch counter scene, Sinatra deliberately ate an entire plate of cold cuts and eggs, a food Brando disliked, during every single one of Brando's multiple takes. Brando fought back with quiet rebellion, using his method acting to antagonize Sinatra. For a pivotal dance scene, Brando acted clumsy, forcing Sinatra to repeat the taxing sequence multiple times. This deliberate manipulation infuriated Sinatra. The film's producers were in a bind. Their feuding was spiraling out of control. The studio went to extraordinary lengths to keep the atmosphere a secret, fearing the press would frame the film as uncontrollable. Ultimately, the clash was a microcosm of Hollywood's generational shift. Though Guys and Dolls became a success, the enduring legacy is the story of two titans whose egos could not coexist. Next, we explore the rivalry of two strong women, Judy Garland and Lucille Ball. The fierce competition for the comedy crown was fraught with emotional complexities and quiet professional jealousy, especially when one star became the undisputed queen of a brand new medium. One sang her way into our hearts. The other reigned as television's queen of comedy. Judy Garland and Lucille Ball, two different stars, shared an underlying tension. Garland and Ball both began their careers at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. Garland was the tragic comic ingenue. Ball was the hard-working B player. The tension stemmed from professional competition. Garland was a cinematic darling. Ball had to fight for every opportunity. This disparity bred resentment in Ball. The feud intensified in the 1950s on the small screen. Lucille Ball achieved unparalleled success with I Love Lucy, becoming a powerful businesswoman in television. Meanwhile, Judy Garland, struggling with studio pressure, watched from the sidelines. The tables had turned. Ball was a titan. Garland was struggling. This change led to thinly veiled contempt. Ball would occasionally judge Garland's lack of discipline. Garland felt the pressure of Ball's success. The studios framed their rivalry as a friendly one. They dared not reveal the underlying animosity. This cover-up protected the image of both stars. Ultimately, the feud was less about hatred and more about the challenges of enduring fame. It was a classic tale of ambition. Here, we confront a far darker and more disturbing relationship. The legendary director, Alfred Hitchcock, and his star, Tippi Hedren. The obsession of the master of suspense exposed the chilling reality of absolute power, leading to physical distress and the professional destruction of his muse's career. Alfred Hitchcock, the master of suspense, created iconic blondes, but with Tippi Hedren, his muse turned captive. Their relationship curdled into a dark, controlling feud that haunted her career. In the early 1960s, Hedren was an elegant model. Hitchcock cast her in The Birds and placed her under personal contract. For Hitchcock, it was the beginning of an obsession to craft her image. Hitchcock's control moved beyond a director-actress relationship. He micromanaged every aspect of her appearance. While on the set of The Birds, his demanding behavior escalated. During the terrifying climactic scene, Hitchcock replaced mechanical birds with live ones without telling her, resulting in days of filming where she endured physical harm. The feud intensified during the filming of Marnie. Hedren was uncomfortable with Hitchcock's scrutiny. She felt he was attempting to isolate her. When she resisted his advances, Hitchcock's response was professional vengeance. Hedren stood up to the man who held her career in his hand, refusing his personal demands. Hitchcock reacted with fury, telling her he would ruin her career. Since he held her under contract, he had the power to follow through. For 2 years, Hitchcock deliberately kept Hedren under contract while refusing to cast her. He declined every offer for her to work with other directors. The studio system covered up this act of professional cruelty. Hedren's experience became one of the darkest chapters of the Golden Age, exposing the reality that absolute power could lead to injustice. Her feud was a prolonged battle for creative freedom. We move to a different kind of covered-up secret. The unconventional and deeply scrutinized relationship between the rugged Western star, Randolph Scott, and the dashing swashbuckler, Errol Flynn. The intense clash of their lifestyles in their shared home, risked exposing a secret that would have ruined one man's career. They were two of Hollywood's most dashing leading men. But off-screen, Randolph Scott and Errol Flynn cultivated a friendship as unconventional as it was enduring. Yet, even in their shared home, an underlying tension simmered. Scott was the quintessential Western star, embodying integrity. Flynn, the swashbuckling adventurer, was his opposite, wild and embroiled in scandal. Despite their different personas, the two men shared an intensely close bond. Their relationship began in the 1930s when they purchased a mansion together. They christened this home Circe's Retreat. This cohabitation between two handsome, unmarried leading men was highly unusual and fueled speculation. The feud was a constant, exhausting clash of lifestyles. Flynn lived with hedonistic fervor, turning their home into a non-stop party. Scott was disciplined and protective of his reputation. Flynn's reckless behavior became a constant source of irritation. Scott played the unwilling landlord, cleaning up after Flynn's parties. The professional risk of being linked to Flynn's antics was enormous for Scott. The studio system went to extreme lengths to cover up their living situation. They ensured press photos always included female co-stars. Any suggestion of an unconventional bond was suppressed. The tension Scott felt, balancing affection for Flynn with the threat Flynn posed, was an unspoken drama. Ultimately, the friendship ended when Scott, weary of the chaos, moved out. Their feud was a subtle struggle between two opposing worlds, one defined by reckless passion, the other by survival. Now we explore the quiet sacrifice and professional tension between Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn. Their partnership was defined by unspoken rules and unbreakable devotion. But the immense personal cost of their private romance was a constant, heartbreaking battle that risked exposure at any moment. Their on-screen chemistry was undeniable. But behind the scenes, the partnership of Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn, though deeply loving, was marked by a simmering tension rooted in Tracy's struggles. Tracy and Hepburn first met in 1941. Their dynamic blossomed into one of the Golden Age's most carefully guarded love stories. The foundation rested on a profound sacrifice by Hepburn. Tracy, a devout Catholic, refused to seek separation from his wife. His romance with Hepburn had to remain entirely out of the public eye. Hepburn accepted the role of the devoted secret partner. The tension was complicated by Tracy's struggles with alcohol dependency and depression. These battles made him volatile, placing an emotional burden on Hepburn. She managed his health and the constant threat of scandal. This private chaos created a professional friction. Hepburn would grow frustrated with Tracy's unreliability. Her fierce intelligence clashed with his insecurities. She was the immovable force. He was the troubled object of her devotion. The studio went to unprecedented lengths to cover up their relationship. The image presented was one of two successful, independent actors. This deception was vital, as public knowledge of their affair would have destroyed both careers. Katharine Hepburn remained loyal to Tracy until his passing. Their feud was a lifelong struggle against public opinion and personal demons. It was a beautiful, tragic testament to a love lived entirely in the shadows. Next, we move to the grand stage of opera, where the legendary diva Maria Callas engaged in a dramatic and very public feud with the Metropolitan Opera. The ultimate power struggle between the fiery artist and the rigid institution ended with the world's greatest soprano being publicly dismissed. She was La Divina. But Maria Callas, as much as she was adored, was a woman of uncompromising demands, whose fiery temperament led to a very public feud with the Metropolitan Opera. Maria Callas was a phenomenon. Her dramatic intensity redefined opera. She demanded perfection, viewing opera as sacred drama. This dedication fueled a formidable personality that frequently clashed with the Met. The tension reached a high pitch in New York City. Her feud with the Met's general manager, Rudolph Bing, became legendary. Bing valued order and stability above the demands of any single star. The conflict centered around Callas's schedule. She argued the relentless pace would harm her voice. To Bing, a contract was a contract. The institution could not cater to one diva. The disagreement escalated to a public confrontation. In 1958, Bing took the drastic step of publicly dismissing Callas. The news sent shockwaves. It was an extraordinary moment. The world's most acclaimed soprano was being fired. The public reaction was polarized. Fans rallied to Callas's defense. Others supported Bing. The press had a field day. The Met's publicists worked tirelessly to manage the narrative. They framed the incident as a separation due to artistic incompatibility, avoiding the underlying power struggle. Ultimately, the feud was a classic power struggle. Though they would eventually reconcile, the dismissal marked a turning point in her career. We return to the Golden Age studios to explore a director's change of allegiance. The professional jealousy that erupted between the German film master Josef von Sternberg and his early star, Emil Jannings. The sudden shift in favor of a new blonde muse shattered a long-time partnership and left one acting titan feeling professionally abandoned. Before Marlene Dietrich, Josef von Sternberg had another muse, Emil Jannings, whose power he harnessed. But when Sternberg discovered a new star, the partnership shattered in a seething feud. Emil Jannings was a highly respected actor. His collaborations with Sternberg brought him acclaim and the very first Academy Award. Jannings was accustomed to being the central figure. The tension began with the casting of The Blue Angel. Sternberg discovered Marlene Dietrich. From that moment, Sternberg's attention began to shift, showering her with the focus previously reserved for Jannings. For Jannings, who had to share the screen with a newcomer, this was a devastating betrayal and humiliation. He was the veteran, yet eclipsed by a glamorous woman. Jannings saw the change as a personal snub. The set became a pressure cooker of jealousy and contempt. Jannings allegedly attempted to undermine Dietrich. The friction created a challenging environment. Jannings became withdrawn as Sternberg centered his attention on Dietrich. Sternberg was single-minded in his vision for Dietrich. He understood the contrast between Jannings's despair and Dietrich's allure was the key to the film's success. The studio minimized the backstage warfare. They presented the narrative of a successful collaboration, obscuring the rivalry. The Blue Angel launched Dietrich to stardom and marked the beginning of Jannings' decline. The feud was a dramatic illustration of the fickle nature of Hollywood genius. Now, we finally confront the darkest secret in our series, the event promised from the start, the story of Jean Harlow and Paul Bern, and the Hollywood cover-up surrounding the event that turned deadly on set, risking the entire future of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. Jean Harlow, Hollywood's blonde bombshell, seemed to have it all. But her marriage to Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer executive Paul Bern was shrouded in secrecy and darkness that culminated in a shocking event, a studio cover-up that turned one film set deadly. In 1932, Jean Harlow married Paul Bern, a respected producer. The marriage was intended to provide stability to Harlow's career. For the studio, the match kept their biggest female star under control. However, the union was deeply troubled. Bern was reportedly manipulative. Just 2 months into the marriage, tragedy struck. Bern was found deceased in a scene suggesting he had ended his own life. The discovery set off a frantic reaction from Hollywood. The studios knew a scandal could be catastrophic. Jean Harlow was filming Red Dust. News of a self-inflicted passing, especially one surrounded by suspicious circumstances, could destroy her image. The studio machine, led by Louis B. Mayer, sprang into action, attempting the most comprehensive cover-up. Mayer and his fixers arrived almost before the police, securing the house and managing every detail. They seized all documentation, including the note left by Bern. The official narrative was manufactured. Bern, depressed, had ended his own life. A conflicting story was aggressively suppressed. The true motive was obscured to protect the studio's assets. For Jean Harlow, the aftermath was a horrific ordeal. Fragile, she was immediately returned to the set, forced to continue filming Red Dust and appear composed. The studio's absolute control had exacted a horrifying cost. The feud was not between two stars, but between the individual's right to privacy and the crushing power of the studio system. While Bern's note was made public, the studio intervention ensured the full truth of that night was never entirely known. The scandal remains the tragic symbol of the lengths to which Hollywood would go. Now we conclude with a mystery that has spanned nearly a century, providing the thematic cool-down to this era of intense celebrity. The quiet feud between the unapologetic queen of innuendo, Mae West, and the reclusive goddess of mystery, Greta Garbo. One, the unapologetic queen of innuendo. The other, the reclusive goddess of mystery. Mae West and Greta Garbo, two unique stars, stood at opposite ends of the glamour spectrum, and their mutual disdain for each other's personas simmered quietly throughout the Golden Age. West and Garbo were titans, yet different in approach. West was brash, embracing suggestive humor. She thrived in the spotlight. Garbo, the enigma, was private. Her mantra, "I want to be alone," was a rejection of the very publicity West courted. The feud was a philosophical clash of personas. Each was dismissive of the other's style. West saw Garbo's performances as tedious. Garbo likely viewed West's style as vulgar. The animosity played out through public snubs. West was quoted as speaking sharply about Garbo's appearance. These were skirmishes fought over the soul of female stardom. The studio understood this rivalry was good publicity. They kept the two women from ever sharing a scene. Their isolation was planned, ensuring the public enjoyed the contrast. The tension was a fascinating representation of Hollywood's cultural divide. Their professional contempt was a reflection of the industry's struggles. West's star eventually faded, while Garbo retired, choosing permanent silence over compromise. Ultimately, the feud between Mae West and Greta Garbo was a battle for the legacy of female identity, fought with the quiet, potent power of irreconcilable difference. Their rivalry stands as a perfect final note.